get started. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. There are over 50 of you, which is really great to see. Thank you very much for coming to this Spring Interview Masterclass. Today we have Izzy Porter with us, who's going to take you through the whole process, and hopefully at the end go through a few example answers as well, and hopefully that will help you with the entire process of getting through the Spring Interview application cycle this year, and hopefully from that you get some very lucrative offers. Just a bit of housekeeping really before we get started. Please put your cameras off and your microphones off as well, please, because this is recorded and it will be put on YouTube as well. So we can keep cameras and mics off. That'd be great. Apart from that, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat, in the chat function in Zoom. Hopefully at the end, if we have some time, we'll be able to get to those. All that being said, I think we are ready to go. So Izzy, the floor is yours. Would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll start the presentation?
Hi everyone, I'm Izzy and I'm studying economics at the University of Cambridge. But in case that's something you're Hello, is that any better? Is there an echo?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, let me know if I need to put my headphones in, because I can do. Yeah, so if anyone's worried about the fact of like, oh, she only got offers because she goes to Cambridge, definitely not the case. Most of the spring weeks I did, there were way more non-Oxbridge people than Oxbridge people. But yeah, I got, I think you'll see on the next slide, I got offers from JP Morgan, Citibank, Macquarie, Rothschild, and Simmons & Simmons, which is a law firm. Yeah. Do you want me to talk through the slides, or are you and Romain going to do this?
So if you, these are the slides we've got. If you just take what seems interesting from here and just comment.
Okay, of course. But obviously, like, if you want to butt in with anything, do say. So yeah, the main types of interviews you'll have for spring weeks are HireVue, which oh, I'm in my second year of university, so I applied for spring weeks in my first year. Let me put my headphones in. Hopefully that will reduce any echo.
Hi guys, how long is this expected to last?
Probably about 45 minutes, an hour, do you think? Okay. Okay, so yeah, you'll have a HireVue, phone or video interview, and yeah, an hour. And then like you're probably quite unlikely to have a face-to-face interview because of the fact that like there's still COVID and everything. But I guess it is possible, and you could have like a more assessment center type interview. So yeah, there's 3 types of questions that you'll mainly get asked, which are motivational, competency, and commercial awareness. So yeah, we'll touch on those during the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So if you don't know, a HireVue is basically, it reduces the workload for people at the investment banks, because they will have already filmed the videos of the questions that they want to ask you, and you essentially film it back. Sometimes they let you have more than one recording, sometimes it's just the one, so be prepared for that, but they should tell you before it starts how many re-records you'll be able to have. So the main things are, have appropriate surrounding. You don't have to have a completely empty background. Like you can see, I've still got, I've done interviews with this background and I've still got bits in the background, but there's nothing majorly distracting. That's the main thing you want to avoid. Make sure you're dressing professionally as if you were seeing them in person, but don't worry if you haven't got a full suit or something. It's just sort of, you know, not wearing a hoodie or whatever. If you've got some sort of shirt or whatever, that's fine. Try to be as engaged with the speaker, and if you were actually talking to them in person, even though obviously you're not because it's been pre-recorded. So yeah, that, like, if you can still kind of make jokes and smile, and then you don't necessarily have to look at the camera the whole time, but I would recommend choosing a spot on your screen that you're going to look at most of the time. So I usually just go for the middle of the screen, because then they know that you're not like looking around up here because you've got all your answers up here. And then if you try to speak as though you're speaking from the heart, that might be better, because then it just makes you sound a bit more, it makes it sound like you actually care about the role. But yeah, the thing that I usually did to prepare was that I would write down in my notepad a list of like all the things I'd done. So that means that if they ask you a competency question like, tell me a time when you failed, then I can like look at the things that I've done and then come up with a quick answer for that. Because yeah, I should have mentioned this with HireVues, they usually give you like 30 seconds to prepare, but what I often do is use that time to think of an example, but I don't think of an answer because you don't want it to sound majorly rehearsed. Okay, next slide, I think, unless anyone's got any questions. And no, I don't think they're recording the time between the first and second try, if there's an option. Okay, so yeah, how to answer motivational questions. These are the what are your motivations for applying to this firm, applying to this division, blah 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 blah. So yeah, stand out. Not going to be that hard, as in the sense of like you are unique. So as long as you like don't try to stand out, just make sure you're sounding like yourself, and then you should stand out. But personality is quite a key thing, because I think a lot of people just think, right, they want me to be really professional, and then yeah, they just try to stay really professional, and you actually want to inject a bit of personality in this. And then practice, but I would say maybe like don't over practice. So make sure you've got an idea. I think the biggest thing is to be able to quickly think of the example you're going to give. That's what you should be practicing, not the real answer that you're going to give, because if it sounds over rehearsed, it will just sound a bit silly. And then yeah, back yourself and what you're saying and the experiences that you've had. Yeah, just be confident in those. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, these are some examples. Why are you applying to the company? Yeah, I always before I do an interview, I look up blank like the firm and then say core values and see what their core values are. And then if I think it's like often quite good to mention one of those. You can talk about the deals and innovations and stuff, but realistically, I think you want to be telling the truth so as much as possible. So don't be like, oh, I found this deal really interesting. You're better off not mentioning a deal if like you didn't actually find it interesting. And because I'm interested in markets, like I never really talked about deals and stuff. Why are you applying to role? Make sure, I think it's fair enough to compare it to the other side. So like you can say why you're applying to markets over IBD, and not just like, oh, this is what I love about markets. And then what would make you a good worker? They'll usually ask you like a specific skill, but I did recently get asked like, why should I choose you out of all the other people I'm interviewing today, which is a bit scary. But again, like that's where you've got to be quite realistic with your answers. So I'd already told him that like while I was waiting for the interview, I was watching Peep Show, and then like when he said, why should I choose you over anyone else, I was like, oh well, I bet no one else has told you that they were like preparing by watching Peep Show. And he was like, yeah, fair enough. Obviously I gave a more serious answer as well, but you know, just try and say that, and then you can be like, and I would fit in well with the with the company's culture, because like I can make myself relatable to lots of different people and find common ground outside of work, etc., etc. Okay, next slide, please. Why you? Why should they choose you? That is the big question. And hopefully, like, they won't really, like, I don't think you're that likely to get asked, why should I pick you? I think it is usually, tell me a time you did this, and that's when you show them why they should pick you. And yeah, you're allowed to say you did something wrong, and that you're going to get, you've learned from that mistake, and like that's what you would do in like a work environment. As in, one of the things that I was asked was like, oh, what would you do if you had a big loss, like you lost £1 million worth of stock or whatever? And like, it's fair enough to say, the first time I think I would probably have to go to the toilets and cry, and then but hopefully I would, you know, become more and more resilient, and you know, pull myself together and make the money back as quickly as possible by maybe doing like more risk-free investments, etc., etc. You know, you're allowed to say that you can make a mistake and yeah, learn from it. Okay, next slide. Why the company? Be niche. I think you'll see what I said when I applied to City in the mock interview, because you can do vigorous research about the deals and things like that, but there's also just like making it more unique to you and why you would want to work there, which is the same as connected to you, because like some of their values you're not going to care about, and some of the values you are. So make sure, you know, if they like, I know Morgan Stanley has like giving back, and so you'd be like, oh well, I want to work at Morgan Stanley because I really the value of giving back really resonates with me, because I volunteer at a charity shop, and then you expand on that. So you can do that, and then ask professionals. The best thing, I actually think this is one of the best questions you can ask if you ever connect with someone who works at a company, is just say to them like, what's something that company does that most people won't know about it about. So I know at Morgan Stanley they do dress down Fridays, and then everyone, so it's basically like an own clothes day, and they all donate money to the Teenage Cancer Trust, but like that's not on their website. You have to have someone tell you that. So just things like that you can talk about. Next slide, please. Why the role? Hopefully you haven't answered this, but also kind of okay to not have it, because you are applying for a spring scheme, and actually a lot of the spring weeks won't be role specific, and will be more general programs. I know that obviously like Rothschild has to be slightly towards IBD and wealth management, and but then City, JP Morgan were specific. Like I applied for markets, and I think Macquarie, you like did a week trying out everything, and then the second week you specialized, which was quite cool actually. But I think if you just look into the roles and think, I basically think, do you like working on long scale projects or short scale projects? And that's the main way to differentiate if you want to do markets and IBD, and that should probably be the only differentiation you have to do for most spring weeks. And also think about how long you want to be working. They're both quite long hours, but obviously IBD is like the really long hours. Okay, next slide. why would you be good at the role? We got sort of already talked about this in terms of like, well, why should they pick you? But you can expand on those characteristics to say why you would be particularly good at that certain role. So for markets, you could be like, oh, I think I'm quite a resilient person, so I would bounce back from losses quickly. But I also like having, doing short-term tasks as opposed to long-term tasks. And then your experience, you can just talk about maybe like if you've done any programs in sixth form, fine if you haven't, because like you've got other things to do in sixth form. And then that's the thing, you can talk about any job you've had, because like if you've had a job before, you've probably done client facing stuff, and that's really important to any role in a bank. Next slide. Okay, I don't know if you want me to just answer this, if you want to say the question and then I can give an answer.
All right, so let's go let's go ahead with these motivational questions then. So start off, Izzy, why are you applying to City?
So I would want to say that I genuinely said this in my interview, that one of the things I said was that when I was younger and I'd get the train to London, I could see the City building on the way, and it was one of the really cool big ones, and so I really like that. But my more serious answer was that the CEO of City actually went to my college at Cambridge, so I obviously I'm quite inspired by her. She did economics as well, and I also like the fact that she's introduced things like Zoom free Fridays, so that then everyone can have a chance to stay off Zoom. I know that won't be as applicable as people go back into the office, but she seems to have a bigger emphasis on flexible working, which I think is especially important if you're a woman that's interested in banking.
Okay, and then on to the next question is, why are you applying to markets then?
So when I was in sixth form, someone came into my school to talk about banking, and she had done trading, and I thought that we were actually quite similar people in terms of personality, and I thought that trading and or markets in general might be a good role for me. I'm quite a chatty person, so I like the client facing side of something, especially like sales. And I also prefer doing short-term projects to longer-term projects, and I would rather make a loss 1 minute and then make it back quickly, instead of spending 6 months on a project and then have it go wrong and then have to start from scratch or start with a different project that's equally as time consuming. That's nothing to say that you shouldn't do IBD, guys. If you want to do IBD, do IBD. Okay, examples of competency questions. So I think it's quite easy to be like, what are your strengths? You just say like, what's good about yourself, and you feel free to ask someone else, because I know it can be really awkward being like, oh yeah, I'm actually like really cool and friendly. I mean, obviously you're not going to say you're cool in an interview, but you could, it often feels like you're hyping yourself up a bit too much. And feel free to ask someone else. And then weaknesses, you're supposed to lead it into a strength. So it's but the one thing they say you should never say is like that you're a perfectionist, because that's just like, oh yeah, my weakness is that I'm a perfectionist, so I have to make sure everything's perfect. Blah blah blah. I mean, that's what you're a perfectionist is, but anyway, and that's obviously like not really a weakness, even if it kind of is. So just say like, oh, I could be like, I'm really chatty, and so sometimes I go on for a bit too long, but often this can like increase my my connection with clients and other people, etc. So then you sort of bring it back to that, to something positive. Tell me about a time you failed. Again, it's just one of those things of like, with a weakness, you're allowed to say something wrong with you, but then just be like, oh, but then actually the next week. So I think like literally one time I said about I failed is that like when I was babysitting, the boy I was babysitting cut his head open. It wasn't my fault, but like as in you say that, and then like, but then you can talk about like, so I failed in this regard, but then like I was really quick to like, put pressure on the wound and and call his mum, and like if his mum hadn't picked up, I would have gone to hospital, blah blah blah. And the next time I babysat, like I was more aware of like all the children I was looking after, blah blah blah. So then you bring it back to a positive. I do just want to say like I'm not an awful person. Like I didn't mean him to get hurt, but anyway. So tell me about a time you worked in a team. Yeah, that's just you talking about like, and it's not always about you being like a leader. It doesn't matter if you weren't the leader of the team. Like it's fine if you're actually the person who was really listening to other people and taking in their advice and then working on that instead of being the person at the forefront. But yeah, talk about the skills that you learned from it. Next slide. The STAR technique, I'm sure you've all heard of this by now. Situation, task, action, result. I think the thing, obviously like the STAR technique is kind of a classic, but I think you'll probably do it quite naturally. So like you will explain the situation, you will say, like you might not even need to explain what needed to be done to solve the problem, because it'll be like quite self-explanatory, and then you talk about what you did, and then you talk about the result. So yeah, I think that's quite self-explanatory. How I'll answer questions at the end, and hopefully remain and Vinesh writing them down.
I'm taking notes.
Okay, perfect. Next slide.
All right, so on to the next round of questioning, I guess. So on to the competency questions now. So first of all, tell me about a time you worked in a team towards a common goal.
So in secondary school, in sixth form, I was actually the director of my school's panto, which was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And this meant that I had to lead producers and writers and actors, and we had to have multiple rehearsals, and we had to get the teachers involved as well, and we ended up having like one of the best pantos. We had very rave reviews, but this involved we had a few blips. So the person who was supposed to play Charlie didn't tell us that she had a part-time job most days a week, so she often had to leave rehearsals early, so this really required us to work together and think about ways to get around this. So what we did is we split the panto into acts, and we do a certain act after school every day, and then she managed to take time out of work towards the actual panto, and then we could do bigger rehearsals, and it all came out very well, and the whole school thought it was quite funny. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then tell me about a time when you persuaded someone to consider something differently.
Again, in sixth form, I did Young Enterprise, which if you haven't heard of it, it's you get in a team and you produce a product and you market it, sell it, etc. And originally a group of girls in my team wanted to produce engraved spoons purely because of the name CU Spoon. And I thought this might not be the best quality product. I think we could probably do something better and make more profit. And I thought, because I went to like an all girls school, that what were the girls like? Necklaces. So what I decided to do was have a vote, and then each side could explain why they thought we should do spoons or necklaces. And we had a vote, and I managed to persuade people that we should do necklaces instead. And we ended up making £400 in our first sale, which was the school Christmas fair, and we made £1,000 in profit overall. So it made Young Enterprise quite worthwhile.
Brilliant.
I feel like it's worth noting there. So like, even though in the question, like I've already answered the how I persuaded someone to consider something differently, unless they tell you like, can you give me quick fire answers, in which case, you know, try and keep it short and sweet. I think it can be quite helpful to say, like, say something good about the thing. So like, I persuaded them to do something differently, and then expand on the fact like it was the right thing to do because we ended up making X amount of profit. And if you have any stats and stuff you can include, that's a really good idea. Commercial awareness, this is the gross bit. No one likes doing this because there's always like it's always a bit more daunting. Like you have to trail through the Financial Times and the Economist, but and make sure you've seen if your uni has a subscription, because I know that if I type in my uni email, it will like take me to, I don't know if you guys have Moodle, but like it will take me to that, and then I do a little like log in, and then I get the free subscription. So that can be that, like obviously that's really good if you don't have to pay for it, but I don't think the Economists do the same, apart from maybe in like the uni libraries, which is really annoying. But the one thing that, this is one tip, if you don't have a subscription and you don't want to pay, which is completely fair enough, I would look, like type in, so you can go to like the markets bit on the FT, or you can like type in the firm. So that's like one quite good thing you can do, is that say you're applying to Rothschild, you type in Rothschild and you can see the recent deals they've done. But then if you can't view it because you haven't got the premium, you can just look up the article headline and hopefully it will come up in somewhere free, and then you're good to go. But yeah, creating your own articles, I know that that's something you can do with Clio, right? Can you write for Clio?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So that is a promotion.
There you go. So that can be a really good way to understand more. And I think there's nothing to say that you can't find something in the FT, write your own version of it, especially if you're like crediting the article, and then expand on like how you feel about that. Like I know for the Cambridge Investment Banking Society, some of their research articles, a lot of them tend to be on like football or takeaway brands and things like that, just because that's what people are interested in. And it's always good to focus on your own interests. Okay, next slide.
And so the last bout of questioning is to do with commercial awareness, of course. So Izzy, what's a current news article that you found quite interesting, and how do you think that the news from that might impact City?
So I saw that breakfast foods are at their most expensive in 10 years, which is obviously annoying. Everyone, you've got to have breakfast. Everyone knows that that's a good way to fuel yourself through the day. And this is obviously due to supply shortages and also bad weather. My dad's actually a potato expert, so I know quite a lot about the general like agricultural markets, and I know that you know, like the floods in Germany in summer were like really catastrophic to crops. But yeah, so okay, so yeah, the like that was really interesting to see. And then in terms of what impact that this could have on City, well, I saw that Kellogg's share price has gone down. So if they're trading stocks in like companies like Kellogg's, then this could have a negative impact on their profit and loss. And then also I think the price of futures are going to go up. So if they're trading futures, you've got to look out for prices. And this isn't just with breakfast food, this is with any sort of food. And then obviously commodities. If they're trading in commodities, you maybe want to be straying away from food commodities and towards something a bit more stable, like potentially metal or oil. Well, maybe not oil actually, but yeah. So yeah, trading and things like that instead.
Great, thank you very much for that.
Any questions? And this includes like, well, I just quickly want to say, I think you've probably noticed from the mock interview that I was nowhere near perfect. You're allowed to say you're allowed to say you can even say, oh, could you just like, give me a bit of time to think about this, and maybe give your thought process out loud, that's fine. Like you're not perfect. So yeah, any questions?
For now, I've noted just 4 questions from the chat. But of course, as we ask these questions, I really suggest that everyone in the group answer more questions to just create a true discussion. So one of the first things that popped up was, what do you think about researching the values of a firm?
As in, like, I assume you mean sort of like, is it important to do that?
Yeah. I mean, like during the interview, like, should you try to assimilate yourself to the values of the firm, or how do you show that you align yourself with the firm?
Yeah, I think that there's no point in going, oh, I really like your value of giving back, because that shows that you're very altruistic and kind, and you're not just using your money in a commercial way, you're using it in a charitable way. Because it's kind of like, great, they know that. Whereas if you go, oh yeah, I volunteer at a charity shop, so I really appreciate that. I worked at an after school club, so I used to say a lot about anything where they were donating to children's charities, or like giving their time to educate children. Or I think you get somewhere, this is a bit pointless, but like they'll read to primary school children. But like if you've got any links like that, I think that's quite a good thing to ask. Yeah, I don't know.
I have a few more.
Yeah.
then we'll switch. Someone asked, do you have any advice on how to conduct research?
I think the thing that I said about the Financial Times thing's quite good, where if you just type in the search bar the name of the company, you can see what it's recently been involved in. But be careful, because like sometimes it will literally just be like, the CEO of JP Morgan said this, in which case like that's not really related. And then looking on their website, looking at core value, look at their networks, especially as if you identify in any sort of minority group. And then also, because also that can be a good way to find out, like some banks have women only programs, like BAME programs, etc. So that can be like a good way of research.
And also maybe connecting to people on LinkedIn. I've heard that a lot of people actually go over LinkedIn and get networks in the companies to learn more like insights directly from the company.
The thing that I would suggest is, if you're gonna connect with someone on LinkedIn, the first thing I would do is look up your secondary school and that company. So the way that I found people who will really give me like a significant chunk of their time is because we went to the same secondary school, or like or one that's very close to one. So like, because I went to a girls' grammar school, like not that many people actually went into banking. But then if I look at the boys' grammar school, then like that, I often find a lot of people, and they'll be really helpful. And if you can't find anyone, go for university. Like, oh, I've just started at Manchester. I saw you were there and now you're working at Morgan Stanley. Could you please help me out with my application? And hopefully they'll say yes. And if not, don't give up, because they might also say, oh no, I'm really busy at the moment, but my friend Sandra, she'd be happy to help you.
Right. And when you have questions about strengths and weaknesses, do you have any advice on whether or not we should use examples and how to employ them in a way which is smart?
Yeah, so I think with strengths and weaknesses, it's often harder to bring up an example. I think you could be like, they could even ask, what are your strengths, and like when have you shown them? And so like I could say, oh, I'm quite a personable person, and so and this was shown when I was a prefect at school. I had to welcome people to school, show them around, look after parents on open days and parents' evenings, blah blah blah. But I think if I was saying I was personable, I don't know if I would bring up an example unless you felt it was necessary. But then equally, I can see that if they're like, what are your strengths, and you just went, I'm personable, and then stopped, then that might not be okay. But if they don't ask for example, you can be like, oh, and would you like me to give an example? And they'll probably say, yeah, like do, and then do it.
It's a good segue into the last question we have noted. how long should your answers actually last? Like, is there a number of seconds precisely we should aim for?
I think you can gauge from looking at it's harder on the phone, and obviously with a HireVue you'll get a specific length of time to answer, and you don't always have to use the time. I would say if they ask you like a fairly chunky question and they give you 2 minutes, I think you probably want to be doing it for like a minute and a half, a minute 45. But then if you're doing it over Zoom or whatever, you can probably see if they're getting like a little bit bored of your answer. But that's where, like, if you're saying something engaging and interesting, like you know, you can keep going, especially if they look engaged. And also like sometimes I want you to keep going in the sense of, I literally had one person, like I can't remember, so I like it was at the City interview, and she said like, why do you want to work at City? And I said about I said about a video I'd watched on the Spring Week and thought it looked cool. I said about the CEO being at my college, and then so that was like 2 big things. And she went, anything else? And I just thought, right, okay, wasn't like, luckily I did have more things, but like it's quite good to have a lot of reasons as to why you want to work with someone or whatever. And sorry, I'm sort of blabbering on here, but the other thing is to have like specific examples for specific things. So I did get asked, like, so I write for a student newspaper called The Tab, and they were like, what, tell me a time that you did this at the Tab. And so it was like I could answer that question without the Tab example, but it made it a lot harder when they made me talk about the Tab. And I'm just going to answer this question that someone's like direct message to me, and that was, should you name drop people you know in the interview? Depends how you know them. I think if it's your mum's friend, no, like I wouldn't do it. But if you're like, oh, I was actually really interested in markets, so I looked up on LinkedIn someone who was a trader at JP Morgan, who went to my uni, and like we had a great chat and I found out this, and this, that's completely fine. But just being like, why do you want to work in markets? Yeah, my mom's friend works there and she said it was really good. Like, it's just not as strong. So yeah.
So someone's asking, are we at a big disadvantage if we apply a bit later? For example, is applying now an issue?
I think applying now is fine, and some applications won't be rolling. I would say, like, if you haven't applied to Goldman Sachs now, you probably won't get in. Because I think they might not actually, I can't remember if they're rolling or not, but I'm pretty sure like everyone I know who got to the next stage applied early. But like I know Goldman Sachs is kind of thought as the big one, and I know someone keeps asking, did I apply to Goldman and Morgan Stanley? I applied to both. Goldman got rejected. Both of them I applied pretty, like I applied maybe even later than now, maybe in November actually, I think, so which really was quite late. And so yeah, straight up rejection from Goldman. Morgan Stanley rejected me, then got an email that was like, sorry, you were accidentally rejected, can you have an interview? I had one interview, I had a second interview, and then they took 2 weeks to get back to me, and they were like, oh yeah, you were like, we ran out of places on the program. So that I would say the main thing is to apply early, but also don't be disheartened if they don't take you. Like, it's not a personal thing, they just don't think you fit into the culture. And I think with someone like Goldman, what I was going to say is that, like, it probably isn't the nicest place to work realistically, but you do get a lot of clout for working there. So if they reject you, it's probably just like they don't think you would fit into the culture. And chances are, if you're applying now, you will be someone who maybe like isn't as on it and like intense as what they would like to have at the firm. So yeah.
Another question. Wait, this is not really for you, but I guess, why are you interested, if you have a question called, why are you interested in private equity? How would you go about answering this type of question?
I mean, well, you've got to be honest. have you been to a talk and someone was really interesting, and you're allowed to say like, I went to a talk from a competitor bank. Maybe don't be like, yeah, I went to a talk at, and name the bank. But yes, you say it as a competitor bank, it sounded really interesting. And then you've just got to explain why. I can't really expand on this question because I've never looked into it. But I think it's just talking about your personal experiences and things you've done that have made you interested. But equally, if you're thinking like, yeah, why am I interested in it? Like, you are allowed to say like, I'm doing the spring week because I want to find out more about it, but from research I think it would be the thing that's most suitable for me because of this and this.
I don't think there are any other questions. Would it be helpful to ask for feedback when a company for a company that interviewed you? I doubt it.
I think it depends. So I applied for the JP Morgan summer internship. I did 7 interviews and then I got rejected. And realistically there, I think it would be fair enough if I asked for feedback because I spent so long doing it. But I think for a spring week, the most amount of questions you're going to have had is 2. And often actually, like, like my friend also had 2 interviews for Morgan Stanley in first year, and she got rejected like very soon after her second one. But because they took so long to get back to me, they were kind enough to ring me and give me some feedback as to why. And actually, I should say this, even if the questions don't seem related to the firm, bring them back to the firm, especially if it's like, right, you're a banker, what would you do in this situation? You'd be like, oh, I would talk to my fellow Morgan Stanley employees. Like, even just saying like that is like remembering, okay, they're interested in Morgan Stanley, this is what they want to do. Yeah, I don't know if I answered, but so yeah, feedback, probably not for insight programs.
Some companies don't actually give feedback. I've heard that companies will not give you feedback at all.
They like, because also like so many people have applied. So yeah. I'm trying to see how important is your score on the online tests. Not too important. Like, you've just got to do well enough. Actually, it does depend. Like, I think HSBC and what Nomura, they're a bit brutal. If you get through those online tests, good on you. Because I didn't. And neither did lots of my Cambridge friends. So yeah, and like maths is a big part of our course, so they're like, it was a bit embarrassing that we all did so terribly on the maths test. Did I have to take any psychometric tests? No. Also, the thing I would say is if they're going to go through the effort of giving you a psychometric test for a spring week, chances are like worth putting in the effort because they're probably someone that's very key on progression, and that's something that you should look for. So like City, Macquarie, I think the conversion rates are like 70%. And the friends I know that got rejected after the spring week, it was because they were like, yeah, we just didn't think you had a big enough interest in markets, which made them realize, yeah, actually I don't want to do it. So I think it's worth looking out for the ones that, because obviously you should put in more effort for places like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Citi, Macquarie, Credit Suisse, Lazard, Rothschild, etc., all the ones that will fast track you, than ones like JP Morgan where you don't really get anything in return for doing the spring week. Yeah, I'm trying to see if
JP Morgan doesn't have a conversion scheme.
Sorry?
JP Morgan doesn't do a conversion?
No. So let JP Morgan let you apply. They literally said in the thing there'll be an opportunity for fast track, and there's not. You get to send in your application about 2 weeks earlier than anyone else. And when I did my assessment center for the summer internship, I think there were about 20 of us, and 2 of us had done the spring week. So yeah, was a bit savage. The only thing was though is I think I really messed up the HireVue. And I have a feeling the only reason I got through to the assessment center is because I did fairly well in my spring week. So I guess it doesn't mean thing, and you do get contacts through it. You know, what's my opinion of Credit Suisse? Fine, a bank's a bank. Like, maybe not as good as some of the other ones. Like, if you look at their share prices, it does give you an indication of like what's the best bank, but it's more about the culture. And if you like the culture there, that's the main thing. And also, like, if you tell anyone else you're doing stuff at investment banks, they'll be like, wow, that's so cool. Like, they won't care that it's, you know, which bank it is.
I think Vignesh has a question, but I don't fully understand it.
All right, I'll ask it. So you said that you applied, you know, in sort of early November time for Morgan Stanley, I think it was. In general, when did you apply to the Spring Weeks that you applied for?
Okay, so let me go back so I can remember all of the ones that I applied for. Oh, well, not all of them, but like the ones that I got in. So JP Morgan, can't remember, but the Spring Week was in February, which was a bit rogue. So it was like halfway through term, and all we had to do was send in our cover letter. But that might have just been for one, not cover letter, just our CV. And that might have just been for people who do like economics or finance related subjects. Rothschild, I think that was like Rothschild and Macquarie. I think I applied for in late September. I did those before I went to university. Don't know why I was so on it, but I was. City, very late. Shocked that I got an interview. But I think that's because they were non-rolling. And City was City seemed to really like personality. So like, I don't know if you guys know who Unjaded Jade is, but like one of my answers when they were like, how did you hear about, or like, how have you done research on the City Spring Week program? I was like, oh, there was an Unjaded Jade video where she went and visited Citibank. And like that, I only knew that from looking up Citibank Spring Week, and then that video came up. But it's just like having unique answers is quite a good thing. And then Simmons and Simmons, that was a law one, so it doesn't matter as much. But I think that was fairly late. I mean, like law applications open and close a lot later. And I would advise like applying for the law schemes because they're usually a lot shorter. I think like the Simmons and Simmons one was 2 days and I got paid 150 quid, so that was nice. Because that's the big thing about applying for Goldman Sachs, you do get £1,000 for doing it. Minus tax, but yeah.
For example, if we know we're interested in, for example, asset management, but we would like to get experience in law, it's a bit hard. I mean, how do you justify to the company during interviews, for instance, that you are actually interested in law?
Because you have to find the bits of law that you're interested in. And also, like, I don't think you should like completely lie, but I think you can exacerbate the truth. So as in, I don't know, yeah, just like, okay, so for my example with the spoons versus the necklaces, did we really have some like proper vote? No, we just ended up like, you know, agreeing to do the necklaces. But by saying like, oh yeah, I made sure we held a vote and it was very democratic, it makes it sound a lot better. So yeah, I think with law, I was quite lucky as well because I did a law thing at school. I think, and talk to people who've like done the law programs. Like you can talk to me and be like, you can say on your application, I talked to a girl who did the Simmons and Simmons Insight scheme and said it was really interesting. Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
I think someone said, what is your opinion of a student who has not done spring weeks or summer internships because of COVID? Completely understandable. I think the only issue is that like, if like they did still exist. So I think even though I know that COVID has been like really difficult for some people, like spring weeks and summer internships had still been going on. So I think that they would expect that you've done something with your time, even if you haven't been doing spring weeks or summer internships. I think if you just tried to push in your cover letter, like, and they might be like, have you got any other comments or whatever? Just be like, yeah, like COVID like put me in a really difficult situation, hence I haven't done any spring weeks or summer internships, then they should be understanding, and you could message HR before and they might be able to put a note on your application. What resources did you use to write your cover letters? Financial Times kind of thing, and like the company website, because yeah, you want to do the why the firm, why the role, and why you, and obviously the why you don't need resources, but why the firm is quite important. And also you can have like why the firm and the role, which is where you sort of go, oh, they did this deal and I thought this deal was really interesting, and because Rothschild did it, I really want to work at Rothschild, kind of thing. Any final questions, or everyone can go and enjoy Halloween if they celebrate it? Yeah.
I think this is it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
coming,
very much,
everyone.
Yes, for the time. I'm sure everyone's taken a lot of your advice on board, and this is going to set us up in very good stead for the last stage of applications now. So yeah, thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and like only ask me a question on LinkedIn if you've got an actual question. Like you don't feel like you have to message me to like build up a relationship. I'll be fine if you add me and then in like a month's time ask me a random question. Yeah. My LinkedIn it's actually, let me write it down because it's Isobel Porter, but I think I'm tagged in the Clio post for this thing, so you should be able to, like for this event, you should be able to find me by looking on the Clio page. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. That was amazing. Thank you.
No worries. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Great work, guys. Golden.